Jai Guru.
Hey Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Welcome to Awake, the Minute by Minute podcast. I'm Mike, and I'm joined as always by Priyank and Chris. And today we have a special guest, Carolina, who is a devotee from Brazil. We're going to talk about Minute 8 today, but we're going to start with asking Carolina a few questions because we want to find out who Carolina is. Carolina, you are from Brazil. Where in Brazil are you from, actually?
I'm from Rio de Janeiro. Yes.
Very nice. Do you have like a SRF presence in Rio de Janeiro? Is it like a center or a temple or something like this?
In Rio, we do have a temple. And here in my town, I live a couple of hours from Rio to the north. Mm-hmm. And here we have a meditation circle in the city of Nova Friburgo.
Nice, nice. If you don't mind me asking, how did you find out about Guruji? How did you get on the path?
It was my sister who introduced me in 2006. She gave me the autobiography. And from then on, I only subscribed to SRF in 2012. That was when I became a student. And this year, actually next month, I'm going to become a Kriya Bhang because I'm not yet.
So very cool.
You know which monk is coming?
I have no idea if a monk is coming because of the COVID situation. I don't know how they will do this. I have no idea.
Right. That's so interesting that you found it through the autobiography of a yogi. I heard somewhere that that's the number one way how people find out about Guruji. I think the second one is through a friend. I mean, you got it from your sister, so you got actually 1 and 2. And I think the third one was people going to Lake Shrine.
Yeah, that's surprising, that one, isn't it?
That's convincing.
Super interesting. So I think you probably saw the movie Awake before. Do you remember the first time you watched it? Do you remember where you were or how it was?
I remember I watched it, I think it was in 2015, maybe, right after it was launched. I remember the first time I watched, I didn't like it much. I felt it was too much, how to describe the life of a saint, right? In a movie. It kept giving me this feeling of like something's missing. No, he's greater than that. How can you put that in a movie? But then recently, last year, I watched it again and then I really liked it. Somehow I was just connecting to everything. I even watched some interviews with the producer and everything. I got to know a little bit better how they produced the movie, and it was actually pretty interesting. I really enjoyed it.
That's so interesting that you say that. I feel like I had a slightly similar experience, mainly because I thought my expectations, they were enormous. They were like, oh, they're making an official movie about Yogananda. Must be the greatest thing ever. And then I watched it multiple times. I watched it a lot since then because I really find that some sections are very powerful, and I started liking it more afterwards. Nice. Should we start talking about the film? So we are talking about Minute 8 today, and Minute 8 kicks off. So we finished off last time where we had Lahiri Mahashai baptizing Yogananda, and we had the scene, and now the narrator talks about the message of yoga. So he says that the message of yoga will encircle the globe. It will aid in establishing the brotherhood of man. And that is like the first thing I think we can talk about. What do you guys think is this message of yoga? What do you think, Chris, when you hear the message of yoga is encircling the world?
Yeah, it's quite funny. The word yoga now is in the Western world is used in so many ways that probably it wasn't intended to be initially. So when I think of yoga, multiple things pop up in my mind, and one of them is the disparity between what I perceive yoga is, and actually, if you go and talk to people, in the street in the UK, they'll probably tell you yoga is something different. But yeah, to me, yoga is union with God, and quite simply, it's the trifecta of meditating, of doing the asanas to ensure that you can concentrate whilst the meditation, and then the devotional aspect of it. So those three components for me, that's what it means, and that's coming from somebody who didn't really hear anything about yoga until he was 26, and I'm only 31 now. So yeah, I did see on this topic, from the Undreamed Of Possibilities, an introduction to SRF by Paramahansa Yogananda, a line in there that I want to maybe read out about this, if I can, just quickly. And it says, it is said in the Bible, "Be still and know that I'm God." And in these few words lies the key to self-realization. So the science of yoga offers direct means of distilling the natural turbulence of thoughts and restlessness of body that prevent us from knowing that we what we really are. By practicing the step-by-step methods of yoga, taking nothing for granted on emotional grounds or through blind faith, we come to know our oneness with infinite intelligence, power, and joy that gives life to all, and which is in its essence of our own self. So when I read that, I thought, that's so much more of a deep meaning than maybe what people might think yoga is today. Like, oh, it's like something good for relaxation, probably good for your body to do all these things. So it's very, very profound, and really, to me, it's like the pinnacle of what it means to be human is yoga. That's essentially what we're here to do, is to reunite ourselves with the Creator.
Interesting. Priyank, what do you think?
Yeah, that for me, even though I was born and raised in India a little bit, this is not like, it's not a term that's used just on a day-to-day basis. So you'd more often use the word for meditation, like dhyan or shanti or something associated with the practice of a certain yoga technique, as opposed to yoga as we kind of describe it as an umbrella term, as Chris gave the definition. So yeah, so for me, later on in my life, even though I use a lot of the Indian language words or Sanskrit words, I came to know yoga later through the popular perception of yoga in the West, which is asanas and hatha yoga. So that's interesting for it was interesting for me to then learn what yoga actually means.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel myself like when you hear in a popular kind of meaning, you think of, like you said, of hatha yoga basically, and then when you think yoga is spreading around the world, it's like, great, oh, we'll all become very like, it's great for mobility and stuff like that, but it's not really what it's about.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
I was reading more on yoga and what it says in some of the texts, and it with Yogananda's writings, it talks a lot about the simple process of reversing the ordinary outflow of energy and consciousness, that the mind then becomes the dynamic center of direct perception. So it's no longer dependent on the senses, but it's capable of knowing truth. There's parts of Yogananda's teachings that say that there's two realities of thought and consciousness, and we're so often wrapped up in all the senses. And it kind of goes to what we're saying here about yoga being all about the senses. It's all about how you feel, and it's going to be good for your body and things like this. It's all about the physical senses, but the reality there is that you're meant to, in yoga, dissolve those things. It's quite erotic in a way, like you're meant to kind of forget the body and go beyond that and go into the reality of truth, thought, and consciousness. So just to add that in there.
Interesting point of view. Yeah, I feel like as a devotee, of course, when you hear this, like yoga means union, and then this makes a lot more sense. What Carolina, what did you think when you hear this sentence? When you hear a prediction where they say the message of yoga will encircle the globe and it will aid in establishing the brotherhood of man?
I feel, to me, yoga, my experiences with yoga started when I was 18 with Hatha yoga, like every Occidental person. And since the start, to me, it means the actual word means union with God, but to me, it means a lot of healing. Since the beginning, I felt many changes in myself. I remember when I was 18, I was very disorganized with my studies, with my schedules. And when I started to practice, I started to create a routine in my life. It was very beneficial. I used to have sometimes some arguments with family members, and that just stopped. And now in this new journey with Guruji, more like bonded to him, it's just like healing me from so many things, these practices, and really practicing love and peace in my heart, in my mind. And this is just like a big joy. And I believe that this message spreading throughout the world is really healing the world. We are all very sick. There's war everywhere. We are now experiencing this collective karma of COVID and diseases. So if we can heal our hearts and our minds, I think this is the message of yoga spreading out and really bringing healing and peace and harmony to the whole world. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I feel like this is like the perfect segue to the part I want to emphasize on this sentence, and it's the brotherhood of man kind of part. When I hear that, I always think of a song, and I want to play it. I hope it will be louder than last time. Let's see if my audio is fixed this time. Yes, there we go. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. Yeah, that was, of course, John Lennon, who sang this. And I wonder if he took the kind of brotherhood of man from it because he read Yogananda, or maybe this was just something that was in the ether at that time. But I really like this, how you said that people will heal their hearts and live together. Like when you think of brotherhood of man, what do you imagine? Would that look like?
Me?
Yes. Right.
So, or sisterhood as well. You can have sisterhood.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, brother and sisterhood.
I think it has a lot to do with respect and consciousness. Just really respecting one another, but also having some consciousness of your own self, of right attitude and right living, so that you don't also push others to a limit, unnecessary limit. It's just really having a consciousness of your own self, of the reason why you're here on the planet, just to really build something together that's good for all, helping one another. I think these are.
Carolina, you must be very attuned to Master and his teachings, because I actually have the autobiography of a yogi up here, and I just quickly searched Brotherhood of Man to see where it was mentioned, and it says it talks essentially everything about what you mentioned there, Carolina, about Brotherhood of Man ripens into compassion for one's fellows, blind to the healing potencies of the soul awakening exploration. Only the shallow man loses responsiveness to the woes of others' lives. And it goes on essentially talking about compassion and love and kindness and healing. So yeah, you're doing well, very tuned.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Priyank? About the Brotherhood of Man?
Absolutely agree with what Chris said. I can see Carolina's halo through the camera.
Yeah.
The people are gonna say we want Carolina. Let's get Priyank off. Like, we need more Carolina on this podcast. Yeah, no, I fully concur with what you guys have said and what that references to the autobiography. I think it's such an important message, especially with, you know, the silo mentality of religions and spirituality. So in my mind, you know, the Eastern way of thinking in Hinduism and Buddhism is really, you know, is really the only solution for like unity. And that is what that brotherhood of man means to me. So, for example, that's not to say that everyone needs to be a Hindu or a Buddhist or whatever, or a Christian. It's just that we have to like absorb or encompass or widen our field of view and our circle to include that. And that doesn't mean that we need to leave our particular faith or our teachings or our guru or our priest or minister or mullah or whoever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such an important message. And often like, even with Hindus, like some Hindus are so hardline, they won't accept this brotherhood concept. And then I say, like, for example, how are you going to involve, you know, the Muslim community in India if you have this such a hardline view on what Hindu should be like and what, you know, other religions should be? And they've got no answer for that. They just think, oh no, they have to conform. I was like, and they're not going to. Just because India has the majority Hindus doesn't mean that the minorities are just going to conform. It's just going to, until we like absorb each other's, you know, ways of worship and respect each other, it's not going to happen, right? And that's part of some of the tensions around the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I heard this word, Mike, I initially thought togetherness and mankind is talked of being made in the image of God. So it essentially is, you know, yoga. It is union. It is seeing the similarities that we share, which is that we are all, every human, made in the image of God. And, you know, we all have, you know, as Priyank says, maybe in around the world, different ideas of what God is, but in the essence of love and the creation, we are all part of the creation. Therefore, we should all come together and see the similarities. And all too, you know, too often do we see differences. So coming from a Northern Irish Protestant Catholic background, I can see where Priyank you're coming from there with that sentiment. So yeah, we should listen to John Lennon more often.
Exactly. I have a similar kind of view, like, and I mean a similar kind of experience. Like, I grew up Catholic in Austria, and I think when I was born, I was like 88% of Austrians were Catholic, and now it's still 66, and the fastest growing other confession is atheist. So that's basically how it is here. It's a very my way or the highway kind of religion culture. So when you speak of religion here, then it's a synonymous for you're Catholic or not, basically. And I feel like being open to multiple religions. So I feel like those countries that have meaningful amounts of minorities in them, it is difficult to get them all to work together, but it's also a blessing because you get to learn how to live together, because this is going to be the future of the world, right?
Yeah, and that's to Yogananda's point, bringing the East to the West, and talking about brotherhood. And you look at London, for example, where we've lived. I don't know, Carolina, have you been there, lived there? I'm not sure. Have you?
In London. Yeah, she's been, I think. No,
No.
gosh.
Never been. Well, it's incredibly metropolitan, and being from Northern Ireland, a very small part of Northern Ireland, I love going to London because you step on the train and you see, you are in the minority as a white person in the UK, and I think there's so many learnings that you can take from that just by seeing how people interact and the body language and everything, how we communicate. I think it's fantastic and really a blessing to Mike's point there. I think it's happening because it should happen. We're kind of being forced and brought together in a sense. So yeah, hopefully the science of yoga can unite everybody in the future.
Yes. And then the narrator continues. So I love this whole Brotherhood of Man concept. I think we could talk about this for the rest of the episode. And he continues and he says, but when I heard the word guru, it frightened me, for I knew what that responsibility meant. There's basically, so what exactly is a guru and what is this responsibility he's talking about, Priyank?
Oh, leave the hard question for me to answer. That's right. Guru means dispeller of darkness. It's a Sanskrit word, or bringer of light. So what does guru mean? This is one of my pet peeves. Perhaps you shouldn't have started with me. Because he's a marketing guru. He's a computer guru. He's like a programming guru. Like I absolutely, whenever anyone says anything that bastardizes the word guru, because it's such for me anyway, it's such an important word in our spirituality, and to see it used in any which way that as it is almost like yoga right now, right? It really affects me. So whenever anyone doesn't use it in the right context, and even if sometimes they do use it in the right context, and they'll say, or like for example, if I've given them the teaching or that they think is cool, they'll be like, oh, you can be my guru. I'll be like, no, you can't use guru in such a it's such a deep word. Don't just throw it around. So I always
words have no meaning now, Priyank. It's like engineer,
Of course. Thanks for that.
Carolina, we were previously discussing, Mike was saying he's a software engineer, and I always challenge engineering as the word because that's another topic. But yeah, that's my take on it. It's a very personal relationship that you have with a guru if you have established that relationship. And Carolina, we were just talking about I think you have your Kriya initiation ceremony in a few months, right? So part of that ceremony is really accepting Yogananda. You probably already have, but this is the formal way of accepting Yogananda as your guru. And yeah, from that point you can't just use the word guru ever again unless it's in that context. Or if you do, then I'm gonna phone you straight away and tell you.
Suddenly she won't be able to speak English. That's
why it took me such a long time to get the Kriya, actually, because I knew I would have to make vows.
Oh yeah.
And I took some time to explore other religions. And in many houses I've been, they were asking me like, do you want to make your vows here? I'm like, no, I don't want to make vows. But then now I understand the value of making the vows. It's just a beautiful relationship with the guru, and it's worth it. Now it makes sense to me.
What did you think, Carolina, because when you're a Westerner and first time you hear that word guru, it's not a natural word that certainly it wasn't in my vocabulary. It was added later on. What do you think is this special thing about the relationship between a guru and you? At
first, guru really scared me. I was really running away from it. And especially here in Brazil, we had many masters or healers that were really, really famous. And since 2015, about that time, all of them started to fall, like get into you know, they were being sued for really bad actions, and they were really being locked in jail. They were really bad people after all. So this whole master and guru idea was just like super scary to me, especially to women, and when the gurus were male people. And but with Yogananda, it's totally different. I actually never met him in flesh, but I don't know. Since the beginning, when I read the autobiography, I remember I was like, this is my favorite spiritual writer. Because to me at that time, he was just like a writer, a very good one. And I was like, his words are about love. They are not like, I read some other Indian philosophy books, and they always felt like a little bit like Bible style, like pointing the finger on the face and kind of putting me down. But when I read Guruji's words, they were just like including me and just like nurturing me with all of that wisdom. And it has a little bit of scolding, but it's all made with a lot of love, also a lot of respect for people's difficulties in overcoming our difficulties, our challenges in life. So was that the question? What was the question again?
Yeah, that answered it very well.
And in that little bit there, Kari, you know, you'll understand now why we talk for hours for just about anything.
We can go forever here.
Exactly.
A minute become an hour.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's what we're looking for, those little gems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think when you hear the word guru?
Yeah, I think for me, a guru is something that is very, very personal. I think to Priyang's point, I wouldn't say the word guru. I wouldn't joke about it. You know, not that I take it too seriously either, but it's something that I really reserve for Master, for Yogananda. And I would say to Caroline's point, I think initially reading the autobiography of Yogi, going to the SRF Center, I actually remember speaking to one of like the elders at the SRF Center and saying, how do I know if Yogananda is my guru? And one of them said, well, why else would you be here? You know, and just in that moment, it was just such a simple kind of comment. And you could take it any which way, but it just clarified to me like the moments in my life that I felt the presence of somebody with me, and it just became very, very personal. I'm getting emotional even thinking about it now, but I did see in the Undreamed Of Possibilities book that it said a true guru is a God-illuminated person who has attained self-mastery, and to me that is really what guru is, and Yogananda undoubtedly has attained what we would call even at the human level self-mastery. And you know, he lived his life in the autobiography. You read there that he wouldn't lie, he wouldn't even utter a lie. And I guess, you know, I would be guilty of saying a white lie. You know, I really, really do not like lying, and I've had that all my life as well. I wouldn't lie for anybody, sort of thing. But I can really see how pure he was, even from a young age. And then he really grew into self-mastery. And what struck me about hearing the word guru is that his response to that, he was frightened. There was a lot of responsibility, there was a burden. And even in his like innocence of his early life, you know, he desired to go to the Himalayas and meditate, but was told, no, you have to go to the United States. You have to fulfill this mission to be a guru, and the gravitas of that really cannot be understated. So yeah, it really opens up a can of worms. You know, when I hear the word guru, to me it's such a personal thing. And I did read somewhere, I can't quite remember, I think it might have been in the lessons, one of the earlier lessons, that if you lead your life with yoga in this life, and you have desires to really help people, or you kind of carry that out in this life, you kind of become, let's say, next in line in your next life to really go on with that and help others. And a guru is somebody that helps others and brings more souls, back to their origin, back to God. So yeah, when I think about this, Yogananda is a great soul that is bringing many others, answering the prayers of many others who desire to know God. So
yeah, that's you put a lot of key points in there, Chris, that like the guru needs to be a God-realized man, because he's essentially, like Priyank also said, the dispeller of darkness. And this is such an incredible responsibility if you think about it. And on the other side, such an incredible service to the disciples. You suddenly have someone, you can visualize him, you pray to him, you focus your whole life on him. And I think that's what he meant when he said that it frightened him to take on this enormous responsibility of not like 5 people, but of hundreds of thousands of people, right? And even after his life, now Guruji is possibly in Hiranyaloka with Sri Yukteswar and has millions of people praying to him, right?
And with Lahiri Maheshaya, also when he was speaking with Babaji in his moment, Babaji in the autobiography of the Yogi, page 183 says, your role in this incarnation must be played on an outward stage. And he talked about having a deep purpose to meet the cries of many bewildered worldly men and women who have not fallen, and whose words have not fallen unheard of to God. And that's same as Yogananda. He wanted to go to the Himalayas and just kind of spend his life devoted to God in blissful joy and meditation, but he kind of had to go the hard path, so he had to sacrifice so much and go through so many difficulties as well, going to the United States, which can't really be understated. It's he's still human, as we heard. He's frightened, he's got these fears, but he still had to break through those things to fulfill this duty that he's been given. So it's extremely, when I think about the word guru, I get really grateful. So yeah, it brings out a lot of good emotions.
And then the next sentence in the movie, there's Masvidal, and he has another interpretation of that burden. And for him, it's the burden to be the representative of a 5,000-year-old tradition. And I'm guessing he would mean the Indian spirituality, maybe the yogic traditions, the Swami order. Priyank, what do you think he's talking about there?
I think, yeah, he obviously, so his mission was in the West, and it isn't a simple one. It's still going, right? So even after 70 years after his passing or Mahasamadhi, it's still going. We're flying the flag, and he's guiding us as much as we let him. So it's obviously no mean feat what he had to accomplish, and B, what he's still has to do even after he's no longer in the physical plane with us. So that is what I think he's referring to there.
And then the movie kind of switches to, I think you see young Yogananda sitting by the Ganges, and like not in an esoteric way, but like in a movie kind of way. This is like a very beautiful scene because he looks at you, and he's like sitting there as a young man by the Ganges, and you hear all this, like you hear the prediction about his life. He's getting ready, it's not like he's being born and he can do whatever he wants. He's being born, and he has a task to fulfill, and it's not a small task; it's a massive task. And I quite liked that they talk about this, and then they then they show young Yogananda looking at you. Chris, what did you think? Did you feel like this was a well done scene?
Yeah, it's quite cool, isn't it? It happens quite quickly. You can quickly switch off to think that this is a story, right? And this is a really nice story. But when those eyes kind of catch you in the scene, you immediately think that, well, you kind of get brought back into some form of reality, and the romanticism of it fades a little bit to see that this is a real individual. So yeah, I thought it was a nice touch.
So, Carolina, did you feel like this was a good representation of Yogananda when they showed this boy sitting by the Ganges? Did you feel it was credible?
Today I paused in this image, and I was taking notes, and when I looked to the screen again, it was like just that little face looking, and I was like, wow. I was looking at him and picture him when he was a little boy. I read that book Meshta that talks a lot about his childhood, and he was just aware of his mission. Like since the movie starts by saying that he was conscious in his mother's womb. So he was already there like a child with lots in his mind, not like an ordinary child. It was already, I think, a child full of compassion.
Yeah.
Very,
the stories different. The stories in Meshta, they're very beautiful. I read those when I was younger. I haven't read it in a long time, but I remember there were some very sweet stories in there of Guruji and his childhood.
Imagine the directors, they're like, okay, we need to find someone that looks like the young Mukunda. He's going to have long hair. I'm sure they didn't like go to Mumbai and say, oh, let's get a load of cast in. They would have literally walked around random towns and villages and go, can we look do you have a young son? Can we look at him?
It's like
would you mind if he, and then they would imagine how many they would have seen, how many boys, because obviously you walk past loads of boys, and maybe they just walked past this little boy and they're like, oh, he looks pretty cool, let's speak to his mum and dad and we're gonna get him on the movie.
It's like where you couldn't see the man who played Lahiri Maheshwara. You could see his name in the titles at the end, but there's no record of him being an actor somewhere else. No, I say no record that I could see. So yeah, maybe it was the same for Lahiri Maheshwara. There's many old, wise-looking individuals.
Maybe this young Mukunda is going to go on to change the world, and we'll never know because we'll just be like, oh, we don't know.
I like the idea that they like walk around and find someone like this. Like maybe, I mean, they are like Hollywood trained directors. They probably got went to a casting agency and they sent them a file with 10,000 faces and they click through them. Could also have been like that.
If we have the directors in, this would be a great question to ask them, wouldn't it? How did you find young Mukunda? I'm sure they've got a fantastic story.
Yes, I would love that. And then it continues. The next, there's a lady speaking, Felicia Tomasco. I'm not sure if we know much about her. Let me read what she says first. She says, this is a man with intuitive knowledge. She's talking about Yogananda. Extraordinary yogic powers, and he could perceive events that were decades in front of him. But his teachings caused controversy. So she is talking about a fully God-realized man, obviously being able to perceive things in the future. She's talking about extraordinary yogic powers, and she's also hinting about another section that we're going to talk about later, controversy in the teachings. Should we first talk about yogic powers a little bit, because that is interesting. Chris, what do you think? What do you imagine when they talk about yogic powers?
Well, first I think of a yogi and think, well, what's a yogi? And again, somebody might have a better definition of this than I do, but to my mind, it's somebody who is realized and somebody who has attained self-mastery. And reading the autobiography of a yogi was amazing for me the first time when I read it, because it tied up so many things that when I grew up, I was more agnostic than anything else. My dad was a non sort of practicing Protestant. My mum very much practicing Catholic. So I grew up quite agnostic. And I always thought about the stories of Jesus, walking on water, doing things, rising from the dead. Like, is there any rationale to this? Because we're taught really in the Western kind of world that no, there isn't, and it's kind of thrown out the window. But when I read the autobiography of a yogi and it mentioned the cities, I got really interested. I thought, wow, so here's something, maybe even you could shoot towards. And we can talk about some of the stories maybe in the autobiography of a yogi where there are yogis who have certain powers. And not to go into this too deeply, but the cities are essentially yogic powers that you can attain through self-mastery, through self-realization. And Yogananda specifically says, don't get too obsessed with them. Focus on your love with God. And these things kind of happen as byproducts. Some yogis out there in India, supposedly in the stories, really focus on trying to master some of the cities and show off and do different things. And so to my understanding, it's this idea of supernatural powers going beyond the physical form to manifest certain realities or to unmanifest certain realities. And yeah, that's a whole other story that I think maybe somebody can jump in and provide the definitions of the cities and all the rest of it for us.
Yeah, there's certainly a few stories in the autobiography where you see some things that are hard to explain with our physics or our understanding of things. That they are definitely a bit supernatural. Do you want to chime in on that one, Priyank?
Yeah, so we see a lot, we hear a lot of them in the autobiography of a yogi, don't we? And Master often, he met a lot of them, and like, for example, the perfume saint who could muster up any fragrance just at the mere brushing of hands, etc. And he always went to see them because he was fascinated by miracles, but he generally dismisses them, doesn't he? So miracles workers just for the sake of drawing crowds through yogic powers. Obviously, that's usually a part of ego consciousness and pride, etc. So it's not necessarily the right use of yogic powers or the right use of miracles if you have them within your capability. So yeah, and this comes back to something that I would say is really important for us. So we may develop some powers, spiritual powers, through our practices, but use and misuse is very important. For example, I think Brother Anandamoy said that he somehow, whilst he was doing his sadhana, an ability came to him to see into his past lives, and he was really fascinated by that, and he went deep into past life analysis, his own past life analysis. And Guruji told him, no, you've been given this gift, but you're now going too far into that space, right? So he brought him back because there's work here to be done. So this is similar to, I think, like, for example, this perfume saint. If Guruji, we don't know what he told him. We just told you he may have told him, listen, given him some advice as to what we just discussed.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, what would I prefer? Would I want to be able to create any fragrance at will, or look into my past lives, or fight tigers for that matter? Like,
Yeah, so
different one.
Guruji very rarely displayed
Yeah.
his powers, right?
Yeah.
Very, very rarely. And if he did, it would always be subtle. Like, for example, there's that story where he was, I think this comes later in the Awake, where he kind of regulates his heartbeat. And to to an average person, they'll probably dismiss that, but only a scientist or a biologist or a physician would be like, hang on a minute, how the hell is he doing that? It's a miracle, right? So he did it in a very subtle way, didn't he? If he did display his abilities of producing miracles.
That is kind of the perception, the popular perception of some parts of Indian, I would say, yogi tradition, that if you are not into spirituality, what you see often is sometimes people who try to perform miracles, like you see that sometimes on TV or on YouTube, like people who haven't eaten for months, right? Or people who haven't had any oxygen for hours, or those kind of things. And I always found this interesting where this comes from. But I also, like Guruji just said, we shouldn't focus on this. When Carolina, when you first got into spirituality, did you also read those kind of things? Was this something that you associated with yogis, those kind of supernatural abilities?
I don't think. I remember when I read the autobiography, there's just like miracles everywhere there, and it took me like a couple of years to really finish the book. I was just reading it and stopping and digesting that chapter that I read for a long time, because it was just like trying to understand and really capture what it all meant. But I think this power of intuition, and especially the power of living the now, I think this is just something that I would really like to have, the superpower of living in the now and not worrying about the future or rewinding, going to the past. And I don't think I would, I've never seen it, but like seeing my past lives, it seemed a little bit too much. But definitely being able to live in the now, just really free from all of these attachments from the past and worries of the future. This would be like great superpower. I would enjoy.
Oh yeah, sign me up as well.
Yeah, I don't know, the greatest blessing that we've been given is both memory and the lack of it. To some extent there. So do you know, to Priyank, to your point, like Master really didn't show or show off any creative power that he had. And to what Carolina you were saying there as well about there being so many miracles in the autobiography of a yogi, I just wonder if those two things, there's something connecting there, because when Yogananda was small, he was playing with his sister, and do you recall the story where he said, there's going to be a boil appear on the forearm of his sister, so something like that, I think, on her arm, and it did appear, and or on his own arm, and his mother sort of had a word with him, just to be careful about your words, because they have force. There's something to them, and there's a line here, if I can read it. I just thought it was pretty cool. I wonder if I've lost it though. Where, Yogananda says, those simple and apparently harmless phrases spoken to Uma, his sister, were done with deep concentration. They had possessed sufficient hidden force to explode like bombs and produce definite, though injurious, effects. I understood later that the explosive vibratory power in speech could be wisely directed to free one's life from difficulties and thus operate without scar or rebuke. So we talk about cities and the more miraculous ideas of yogic powers and somewhat kind of romanticize them in a way. Like it's not to overlook the power of the spoken word and to yogis or self-realized individuals like Yogananda, the power and the force that can have. I say as I lose my own voice. So yeah, I just thought that even that is so significant. That what does that mean? And to think about the Bible and how in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word. I think it says something like that. And I remember as a kid, I always thought, like, what does that mean? And it was never taught in the schools, and it really annoyed me. Like, this is too significant. Like, I couldn't get past line 1 in school, in Bible school, because nobody was addressing this. But then, Yogananda in this book does address it. It talks about the life force, the force behind these words, and goes into a lot of detail in other books as to the reality behind that. But just to touch on it briefly, because we could talk for hours on that alone. So
yeah, for sure. The next scene in the movie, we see performed a Hindu ritual. It's called an arti. I actually looked it up in the dictionary, and it says arti is the ceremony of lights. It comes from the Sanskrit word aratrika in Hindu and Jain rites, and it's the waving of lighted lamps before an image of God or a person to be honored. In performing the rite, the worshipper circles the lamp 3 times in a clockwise direction while chanting a prayer or singing a hymn. And I've seen this many times happening, and it's very beautiful. We were wondering about the different practices between YSS and SRF. And I think Priyank had an opinion on this one.
Yeah, so I've been to a few YSS events in India, and there's a few differences. For example, in India, they like to have a colossal sized image of Guru. Like, this picture is like the one behind me. The one in the autobiography of a yogi is like a meter high. So like, we usually have them like quite, they're not that big, are they? They're pretty much lifelike, but this is like absolutely like 2 or 3 times magnified. And so there's that difference. And then there's also this arati. So generally in SRF centers, we don't usually do aratis. On special occasions, like Brother Chidananda did it recently, and there was a nice video of that. But generally we don't do them, especially at the London Centre. We've never done an arati as far as I can recall. But in India, it's in YSS, it's a very regular occurrence, and we see that video in the Awake movie. Arati is something that is very traditional, and it's practiced widely across all the different religions and cultures in Hinduism and in across India, really. So yeah.
Can I just ask why? From what I could see, there was only guys in that shot. Was there a reason to that? Was there only men?
In YSS?
Some kind of... Sorry, no, apologies, in the movie.
Oh, no, I don't know.
Did you notice that? I just wondered if there was like a, for some rituals, there's male-female divides for reasons, energetic reasons and things. Yeah, I just noticed it, and it kind of stood out to me when I was watching it. Like, oh, everybody's guys. Like, I wondered. It's
interesting you should say that, actually, because especially in this generation, things like bhakti-related activities like arati, men generally don't really want to do that. It's usually the women, like my wife, for example, does that kind of, even with me, like my wife does usually the aratis, and she does the food offerings and things like that. And I just like to meditate. So it's actually the inverse in this generation, amongst Indians anyway, the inverse, like the men don't want to do those devotional ceremonies, whereas the women are all over them.
Yeah, it's very, I feel like when I was in India, it's like devotion is something that is so important there, And I don't want to compare East and West, but I feel like that is something they really focus on a lot there. And I feel like the arti is another way of showing devotion. And at some point, it's like almost tangible, you know, how big the love of some of the devotees is for Guruji and God. And I really love that. Have you ever been to India, Carolina?
Yes, I was there in 2013. It was amazing.
Nice.
And I agree with you. I have a lot of, the sensation I get is of devotion, their expression, the monks' expression while doing the arti also itself, a lot of love and respect, service to the Guru.
Yeah.
I had an amazing time in India. I think everybody should go there at least once.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's like an experience going to India, especially if you have never been. It's definitely something that should be on the list. Did you see any of the YSS ashrams there?
No. At that time, although I was already a student, I remember when I'm a weird person. I was there and I like refused to enter ashrams. I was like, I'm not gonna enter ashrams. And I remember the only one that I entered was a Sikh ashram in a Sikh temple in Delhi. And I forget his name.
Guru Nanak?
A saint from Tiruvannamalai, his ashram. What his name? Guruji
Sri
was
Aurobindo,
there.
you're not saying? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ramana Maharishi?
Ramana, yes.
Ramana Maharshi.
Wow. Third guess. I'm impressed.
These were the only temples I entered. I remember there was a Shiva temple, but I couldn't agree with the elephants being there.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was sometimes very contradictory. But like this experience in the Sikh temple, it was really amazing. We ate with the people there, we chanted, we stayed there like for many hours. It was really beautiful. Nice. It was a really good experience.
Yeah, it's
I have to go back there to check out Guruji's ashrams for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that about ashrams, because that was my first time when I went to India as well. Like, where are we gonna stay? And I was just gonna go in a hotel, right? Like, that's kind of what you think when you're from the West. And the idea of ashram came to me later. I had been at a retreat already in the States, and that kind of was sold to me like that. It's like a retreat kind of, and it was a bit like that. And then once you are in there, in this environment, you actually want to stay as long as you can.
Yeah.
Because life becomes very easy. You get amazing food. You have monks around you and other devotees, and you're usually in a beautiful place. So I can only recommend that.
Did you know, as a Northern Irishman, I would say, as somebody who's British, rituals, and certainly in the Protestant church as a kid, it's just not something I would have seen in this way. And going to the SRF, there wasn't too much, I don't think, of this type, maybe to Priyank's point, but even with the candles that might have been lit at the SRF Center, people take the fire and give themselves almost like a fire bath. And first time I saw that, I was just looking at it like, what's going on? Because I didn't really know what that was either. So there's so many of these rituals that have meaning and have purpose behind them that myself and so many others are going to be completely ignorant of, to no real fault of her own, I suppose. But to the outside person, to the lay person, it's going to be so confusing, so alien, or so unrelatable of sorts. So we could definitely do a better job, I think, in the Western world, and in other countries outside of India, to educate ourselves on these things. And what I like, actually, in the segue off of this film, Sadhguru goes some way when he gets asked questions on this to answer, like, why we do certain things, why rituals are the way they are, why certain maybe holidays and moments or days in the calendar are the way they are. There's so many little mysteries that are left to be unsolved and spoken about in the Western world. I can't wait just, for maybe, a generation or two down the line for all of this to be mainstream and public knowledge. It's going to be so much better. So you could easily look at this scene as a layperson and not know what's happening.
Exactly. And now we move to the next scene where you have Varun Soni, who says he would be called into question and everything he worked for would unravel. So he's basically starting the talking about some difficulties that also occurred when Guruji founded SRF, and then there was some controversy. And we do have a little bit of time. We can go into this a little bit. Priyank, what do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, it's kind of it doesn't, for me, it didn't really fit in with the narrative in that part of the script. So I actually had to think heavily about this, and Carolina and I were discussing this offline, what this meant. And I think I think they're using it as a tool or a lever to hold on to the audience. So at the moment, they were just, for example, the narrative has just been, oh, here's a great spiritual master, guru, and he's going to go to West, and we all know the glories of what happened. But actually, there was some controversy and there was some issues, and I think so. Later on in the film, they actually delve into this, and they represent it quite well in minute 46, which we'll have to talk about. So everyone loves. I think a scandal or something negative, people usually like to latch onto, don't they? And not like to, they do latch onto, and they always, that intrigues them. And I think this is what the writers have done here. So in this minute 46, we hear about Swami Dhirananda, who came to US to help from India. He came to help the master in SRF's work, but he was caught giving private lessons to a married woman, and newspapers and the husband got found out, and it was a big controversy, and there were headlines in newspapers like love cult and things like that. So it was like a very crazy time, and eventually Swami Dhirananda left the organization, and we can talk about that later. But there was that controversy. So I think what the directors are doing are pulling in the audience to keep their attention, because it's not just all going to be one happy story. It's going to have some controversy, which you should stay tuned to hear about.
It's interesting, right? Like you say, I like your point that you said you need a little bit of a change of atmosphere. You need a kind of when you have a light, you also need shadow, to keep a movie interesting. I wonder if this is also how life works, and this is how life keeps it interesting, because that's kind of how it felt to me a little bit as well. You have someone establishing this organization that will free millions of people, and then that you have also things that don't go perfectly well, even though we don't really know the ins and outs perfectly, but we do know there was a controversy back then. What do you think about this, Chris?
Yeah, it's something that I think what's been touched on is a little bit unfortunate with the truth and the reality of some gurus, would-be gurus out there, that I think with all power, you can get corrupted very easily, and it's unfortunate that so many people do succumb to that. And we see it in all sorts of denominations of religion, not just in the Indian guru lineage, but in the Catholic Church. We all know about a lot of the issues there. But I think when it comes to Yogananda, he really faced a lot of racism and faced a lot of things that would have teed him up very easily to have rocks thrown at him, put it that way. So it was all too easy to try to claim that Yogananda was something, and things, some controversy surrounded him, where it was really, in my books, looking back at it and reading some articles about it, probably due to ignorance or lack of understanding, knowledge of who he was and things like this. So yeah, it just, to go back to what I said earlier, just makes me all the more grateful, because these things, it wouldn't have been easy to face adversity like that and continue in the manner that he did. I think when I first heard about some controversy that he had, and I was really shocked to have heard it, because it was even a blip on the journey. You know, he didn't make anything of it. It's not referenced. He plod on with his mission, and that prevailed. And I'm so grateful for that, because this is not just a footnote in the history of Yogananda's life. So yeah, pleased he overcame it.
Yeah, I completely agree. What I found interesting was that I grew up in an SRF family, and I heard about Brother Dhirananda a little bit, but not too much. And actually, that wasn't something I had heard in a long time, and I didn't really know the details. And the movie kind of put this more to the forefront, something that otherwise wouldn't have been on my mind at all. Was that similar for you, Carolina, or did you know about this story before you watched the movie?
I don't remember. I think I learned about it in the movie, but I had the same feeling as Priyank. They put like it's a movie, so they have like this little sinister song music in the background, and then some ghost voices, and they cut the scene and they jump to something else, and then they're gonna talk it later on. So I think it's to give like a thriller to the audience, like, oh, something's coming up, something bad. But then giving already the spoiler later on, they proved that he didn't do anything bad. So it was just, I think it's just it's a movie trick just for the audience. But I thought it was interesting of getting really the story out there, like really transparent. Hey, this happened. He had a partner who ended up marrying to someone who didn't keep on the path. It wasn't really Yogananda who broke the vows, but his partner. And he couldn't, although he did have yogic powers, I think that sometimes you just really trust. They were best friends. They grew up together. He's mentioned in the book Meshta also, they knew each other for a long time. I think it must have been a great deception for Yogananda to really face this situation. And yeah, being misunderstood. I mean, Maya, it's a really, really strong force. People don't want to believe in something good. People don't want to believe there's something greater out there, or that there is this person who is like a saintly soul. So I think, yeah, all of his work would have been put into question, because it's just Maya pulling everything away from God, from truth, and from the good things. But luckily our master, he looks like a master. Me, he's my true guru. Yeah, he didn't fall in the material trap like others. Because I think even a realized person can eventually fall into the abysm of Maya again. Who knows? But he really, I think Yogananda stood there till the end. And really performing a last miracle when he died by keeping his body warm and alive for several days, right? So,
yes, that's right.
Pristine.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
It is, and it is like you said. There's Maya is always there, and it's a motion picture, and you need light and darkness, otherwise it doesn't really work. Yeah. So speaking of spoilers, we can. What is ahead in the next minute 9? Actually, do we know? What do you have a short spoiler for us, Priyank, for our next one?
Yes, we get to hear a lot more about from Brother Vishwananda for the first time in the movie, who's obviously a very elevated soul in the organization, and he's got a lot of years of dedicated service to Self-Realization Fellowship. So we get to hear about him and more of Deepak Chopra, and it gets pretty scientific, I suppose.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. Does anyone want to add anything? else?
I do. Yes, quickly. I think I listeners, you won't know, but I usually give these guys the script before we do this, and Mike quoted that it was a lady called Felicia Tomasco that said the lines, "This is the man with intuitive knowledge, extraordinary powers, etc." But in the book, I believe it was actually a lady called Gloria Schultz, who is a stage and film and television producer and actress under the stage name of Lauren Jones, as well as a long-time follower of Paramahansa Yogananda. She and her husband are acclaimed film and TV directors. So Michael Schultz were consulting producers of The Awake, The Life of Yogananda. And for those who are watching on YouTube, this is what she looks like, this lady here. So yeah, so that was, I think that was an error on my part, but that's who that was, that the voice of that was.
Good that we cleared that one up. And yes.
Yeah, sorry. The only thing for me to add is just to reiterate, anybody who's listening, watching, who enjoyed some of the material that we've covered, who thinks that there was something missing or they wanted to add something, interact with us, drop us a line, drop us a message, and we can always in future episodes make comments on reflections of any of your spiritual interpretations or anything that you can perceive. Please do interact with us.
Yeah, and if we're not perfect, obviously, this is not a scripted podcast. So if there is errors that we have quoted, like the one we nearly did just then, please do let us know, and we'll see if we can correct that later on.
Absolutely.
And Carolina, thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely love you. We think you probably have one of the best accents around. British English Brazilian English accents are fantastic. How was it for you, Carolina?
Oh, it was amazing. Thank you so much for this invitation. I learned a lot with you guys, and exchanging these ideas, I felt really enriching. It was super cool.
Jai Guru.
Call me for another one later.
Yes. You will regret saying that.
Minute 107 or something. 107 or something. Oh, for sure.
Yes. Thank you for coming on. And I think this wraps up minute 8. And I thank you all for listening. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.